Welcome, Jeffrey. Welcome, viewers. Although we only have one viewer currently, so it's more like not viewers but viewer. Um, but we'll see how it goes. So we're going to do part two of the basically mentoring sessions to help how to build a NLP coaching practice. In this case, in California. Last time we learned or we checked out what your brain type was, and we discovered you had a type 9 mediated brain. So how did you do anything with that new knowledge in the last couple of weeks?
Yeah, well, I did a number of things actually. I went to check out a couple of the different Enneagram sources to see kind of how that pings off of that. I know it's somewhat related. The brain types are somewhat related to that.
Yeah, it's absolutely inspired by the Enneagram. It's just that the
inspired.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's just that the Enneagram is not, I say, not scientific enough to be actually able to teach that at the university.
Right. That makes sense. So, yeah, so I read a little bit though, but with a grain of salt, because I knew that I was going to get different kinds of viewpoints. That's actually what I was looking for. I wanted to hear the kind of explanation of, or read the explanation of a couple different people. Right. But, I spent very little time with that. I spent a lot of time really thinking about discipline, journaling about discipline. I worked out some affirmation, you could say, based on some of the work that you did in the ABC NLP practitioner course.
Right.
I really like the, well, for instance, I wrote one that says, I am feeling lazy, but I am extremely disciplined. I'm excited by my practices. I'm inspired by my methods. Good. So that but affirmation, I think it's really useful. So I printed it up and put it on the wall and said that to myself, I don't know, 100 times at least this last week. And but I also spent a lot of time working on some of my own NLP processes. I think this whole idea around being lazy and the need for extreme discipline is actually the source of some trauma in my life.
Oh dear.
Yeah. So I've worked through a process called the core transformation process about a half a dozen times. With some of the things that come up for me when I experience the stress that I experience when I'm really trying to be extremely disciplined. The major thing there, and as far as I can tell, would be probably fairly consistent with people who are a type 9 as a mediator. There's a tendency to be a people pleaser and to be a peacemaker. And so that might mean that I have, in my interpretation, like porous boundary lines that are weak or that aren't held well because I'm allowing other people to get what they want or making sure that I'm serving other people. In fact, I'm even, as you were describing before, I find these sort of loopholes, and what that often means is that I take the perspective of somebody else and give them what they need instead of understanding what is necessary for me to say no to, so I can stick to the game plan that I had outlined for myself.
Exactly, yes.
And so there is some pain that comes with that because there's fear of abandonment, there's fear of just upsetting the apple cart, so to speak, upsetting other people because I'm deciding that I need to stick to my game plan and do what's best for me and the way I see things.
I'm very good at turning over the apple cart, so.
Are you?
Yes.
I am too, actually, but it's not always done in an elegant way. It's sort of like part of the thing that immediately occurred to me, day one after I talked with you is that I get into this. I can be extremely disciplined about some things for a little while, which I think technically isn't extremely disciplined, but exactly. I'll get somewhat rigid, and then I'll sort of break a thing, so to speak, break a relationship, kind of tear down the walls. So it's not done in an elegant way.
Right.
And I think that I've certainly learned to be better about that, but it kind of goes one way or the other, where I'm just not sticking to the game plan, or I'm just completely upsetting the apple cart. In fact, it's like I'm tearing down the whole apple factory.
Right.
And just break it all apart, and, well, logically at least, or just sort of say things that can't be unsaid typically. So anyway,
Okay,
I've learned
good.
how it's part of the discipline. Discipline is also interesting because there's multiple disciplines. It's not just one discipline, right? So I want to talk with you about that a little bit.
Okay, I'll have to grab my headphones because there seems to be some kind of echo in the stream. Be right back.
Sure.
So let's see whether this is going to solve everything. If I can, get the knot out of it.
Get the mud out of it, yeah. Highly technical audio engineering term.
Yes. But now I have to reroute the sound to my headphones.
So are you hearing echo on your end there?
No.
In the feed, okay. Because I don't hear anything on this end, it sounds great.
Okay. Can you say something?
Something.
Good.
Something. Okay.
That helps. Probably no more, no more echo in the stream. Good.
Okay.
So, I'm reading the chat, by the way. If I look.
Yeah. No, I see that. Yeah. Right. Yeah. And I'm not interpreting that as some kind of an internal dialogue where you're figuring things out.
Exactly. So I want to hear about NLP disciplines. I have a whole spiel about the generation of NLP from Bandler to Tony Robbins. Yo, the audio is fixed. That is great. So I don't think you meant disciplines as NLP disciplines. We were talking about brain types, which is my neurogram model based on the neuroscience of Colin de Jong, a professor from the US, inspired by the Enneagram. And we figured out that Jeffrey had a type 9 mediator brain. And for mediators, their deadly sin is laziness, but their main virtue is extreme discipline. And Jeffrey has come up with something interesting, because I never heard it before, and that is that there might be more than one kind of discipline, even up until now. But he's the expert in mediators, not I. And up until now, I had always figured out that there was only one kind of discipline. So we're going to look into that in a few moments. But there is actually quite a number of different versions of NLP. So actually in 1970, when Richard Bandler started out developing NLP, there was no NLP, so did not use NLP to develop NLP. That is, of course, that would have been an impossibility. You can't use something when you're trying to figure something out. So what he did before there was NLP is something different than NLP. And then we have the very early version of NLP, which is basically modeling of the famous therapists that they did. and but they figured out that modeling has a lot of drawbacks. Basically, a model is too rich, and you get the risk of getting something bad, something negative, imported with the model is too high. So they switched to figuring out specific strategies, and then generalize those strategies to NLP techniques. And one of the first strategy that they figured out was how to get psychotherapists to work with hypnosis without them knowing that they work with hypnosis. So the 6-step reframing technique was specifically developed to use a hypnotic induction principle called fragmentation. So that people would go in and out of a kind of trance, and that would actually hypnotize them without them knowing that they were being hypnotized. And the same goes for change personal history, the two big NLP techniques that were described in a book called Frogs into Princes. It was published in 1978. So that is the 80s version, basically. That's what became known as the NLP version from the 80s. And then in the 90s, Richard Bandler, when the science discovered or rediscovered hypnosis as, this really does exist and it is safe to use, Richard Bandler has created a complete new way, or not a new way, but an updated version of NLP. He called it neuro-hypnotic repattering, but it's basically a new version of NLP that no longer uses hidden covert hypnosis, but uses hypnosis in an openly way. And so that's the 90s version of NLP, that's how I call it, which is the most recent version. Tony Robbins is using an 80s version, but he's calling it neuro-associative conditioning to get out of a licensing agreement that he had with Richard Bandler, but it is basically the same as NLP, the 80s version. So that is my idea about NLP disciplines, but please enter it in the chat if you have other ideas. Then I'll go back to the disciplines that Jeffrey figured out, because I'm very interested to learn more about the idea that there are multiple disciplines that you as a mediator can do different kinds
right.
of...
Taking multiple perspectives at once. So what I mean by that, first of all, is that the word discipline can be very positive. You know, these are things that we do to reinforce good behavior, and the way that we create constraints around helping a child, for instance, or anybody learning anything, to creating constraints to help them to focus and to reinforce and to complete the behaviors that will, you know, create an outcome, essentially. But also discipline has a negative connotation. Very, very, very often when we use the word discipline, people are thinking punishment, or they're even describing punishment, which they're very different, but the same word discipline is being used for both of these things.
Yes.
I think the word discipline actually covers the full spectrum of things we do to negatively reinforce or to, to stop bad behavior and to redirect that energy, and also, the positive aspects of that.
Right.
So there's one.
Discipline is an ambiguity in English.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. Yeah.
Yes.
It's a very high level nominalization, right? We're talking lots of little behaviors, across lots of contexts, so it's a word that has, in some respect, little meaning because of that. It's so ambiguous. It's hard to label. So that's partially, it's where I started with this. As I thought it through a little further, also, for instance, you're at a scholastic philosopher. You've studied philosophy at great length. It's a lot of reading. We were talking just a little while ago. But you could have, for instance, studied medicine or mathematics. In fact, I think you did study some mathematics. But those could be considered different disciplines. Engineering is a different discipline. Right, than philosophy, right. So those multiple disciplines in that respect also. Again, very ambiguous word, and that's why I say multiple disciplines. I know that's not what you intended when you said extreme discipline.
Extreme discipline.
We're really talking about, finishing things ultimately, right?
Well, yeah, that's why I said the extreme discipline is making some kind of agreement with yourself and sticking to it, no matter the consequences and no matter the loopholes that you are able to find.
Right. Okay. Stick to itness, I would call
Yes, that might
Okay.
very well be it. Yes.
Okay. All
So
right.
that
Stick to itness. That's how I refine the whole thing for myself after this 2 or 3 days of internal
yes,
dialogue.
good, good.
Yeah.
And it's amazing that you said, well, if you only do extreme discipline for a short period, it's not really extreme discipline, because I had a mediator. I just had 3 days of training, and yesterday there was a mediator who said, "But I do extreme discipline. It's only that I do it for like 10 seconds."
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I do it for several months in many cases.
Okay.
You know, like for instance, I weigh about 210 pounds now, but I was very fit, about 2 years ago at about 275 pounds. I'm sorry, 175 pounds. But I wasn't disciplined with my diet, for instance. So,
Right.
that period of time came and went. And I've done that with a lot of things. I was
Right.
very, very focused on NLP and those processes. And then I relaxed and kind of shifted gears to maybe a disc, for instance. I was very interested in disc. So I shift my attention and will try out different things and sort of, stop the, practicing so much. I have a black belt in Kempo. When I got my black belt, I quit.
Okay.
I totally quit.
Finished. Yes.
Yeah, which is not how it works. You should
No.
continue doing it basically all your life if you're really a
Exactly.
martial artist. But I'm not really a martial artist. I don't identify myself that way.
Right. But it's
So,
important to figure out how you want your life to look, and then
yeah.
make sure that those elements that you really, I call it the big dream, like what the elements that are part of your big dream, that you, if you haven't acquired them yet, acquire them, and once acquired, keep them, don't lose them.
Right. Yeah, that's definitely part of it. So, that big dream concept, I think it's an important thing here. And I think it's what you said we would be getting into eventually in this call,
Yes.
like a 30-year plan.
Exactly.
I got to say that's very challenging for me to think in those terms, even 5 years out. And I know how important that is as a life coach. I always encourage people to do this, and I walk people through processes, and I can somewhat walk myself through that kind of a process. But I got to say, it's really challenging for me to really visualize a detailed, concrete future,
Okay.
or long-term plans.
Right. Fortunately, I'm going to fill it in for you, so you don't have to think about it. You just have to follow my instructions. I've done it with thousands of people, and afterwards, everyone is very happy with whatever I come up with for them. So that will be quite easy. So indeed, the topic for this episode of the mentoring is to go through what I call the NLP Circle Foundation coach format. That is a format for coaching that I developed, and that we have started a foundation here in Europe. So that I say the coaches that I train actually know what to do, when to do it, how to do it, get the self-confidence that they're able to do it. But I always tell them I never can make a coach be a good coach. They have to go out and work with real clients, because only real life experience makes you good at something. There is still a remark on Tony Robbins, so let me check the remark. Tony Robbins has his own thing where he gets into someone's face with his gigantism and use the emotional momentum of scaring the crap out of people to change lives. Yes, indeed, but that is actually the 80s version of NLP. So if you look, for instance, in something called the fast phobia cure, in the 70s they figured out that people who got rid of their phobias without any regular help, that they did a two-step process. First, they got so much tired of their own problems that they said, and then they had the phobia once more, and then they said, oh, this was too much, and there was the straw that broke the camel's back, and then they saw themselves doing it without fear, and then the problem was solved. And so in the 80s, NLPers were pretty much busy trying to get people to so much be tired of their problem and making their problem as big as possible and as scary as possible, so that they would go to this breaking point of having the straw that broke the camel's back, and then they would replace that with the new positive pattern of seeing yourself doing stuff without fear. But as it turned out, the first step was not necessary. So in the 90s versions, Richard Bandler eliminated the whole scaring the crap out of people part. It turns out that if you basically see yourself in the future doing things that go wrong, it's very important never to imagine that everything goes perfect, but you can see things going wrong. But then you can also see that it doesn't impact you, that you stay calm, you stay positive, and that from your own place of power that you actually solve problems rather than are succumbed by it. And that is most of the time enough to get rid of all kinds of problems. So
I think it's worth mentioning too, if I can.
Yes.
The original model, was based on Fritz Perls' work. And Fritz Perls is known for badgering people in the same way you're describing there, getting in their face and then sort of forcing them to hallucinate, but like by badgering them into it, know. And Richard Bandler in many videos can be seen carrying that same kind of persona where he's virtually in their face, if not at least verbally badgering them to do something.
Right. I did it Tuesday in the training, in the master practitioner course that I did. And at the very end of the day, it turned out that and that's all my fault, of course, as the trainer, but that the students did not get what I asked them to do in an exercise. And I was, due to time restraints, I wasn't planning to actually do a demonstration. So I said, okay, fuck it, I'm going to do a demonstration anyway. Then we're going to run over the time limit. But I used what I called the aggressive mode of hypnotizing someone. And of course, these are people who have already done like 20 hours of hypnosis training. So I know they can go into a trance really quickly. But I just went very mad. I just said, "Go into trance!" And the lady immediately, she was immediately
I love
gone.
it. That's fun.
Yes, yeah. It was just so much fun to see that. Often people associate NLP so much with positive thinking and feeling good and being nice to each other and being happy. But in reality, it's all about basically how do you get from A to B in the most efficient way, not in the most nice way or the best feeling way, but the most efficient way. And most often feeling good is the most efficient way, so it's important to feel good most of the time, but you can actually do a lot with that other stuff. That's how Bandler got his working with people. He started the college Gestalt therapy group, in Santa Cruz as an undergrad, Gestalt is Fritz Perls things. Absolutely. So we have someone watching who's very knowledgeable about things. So Richard Bandler actually got a job writing out sessions that were taped by Fritz Perls. He came from a poor background. One parent family. He and his mother lived in San Francisco in the 50s and 60s. And he had lots of jobs to earn some little money, among them writing out sessions with Fritz Perls. And Richard claims that he actually, after Fritz died, changed a lot of the wording, why people feel that his last book is the most clear book. But according to Richard, it's just because Richard changed some of the parts. He thought, I should have said that. This is much better like this. But I don't know whether that's true. Nobody can check it. But at one point he got a college about Gestalt therapy, the therapy form that Fritz Perls developed, where the professor said, well, you should not expect to be as good as Fritz Perls because he has a special gift, a special intuition that we lack. And then Richard said, it's bullshit, everybody can do it. Whereas the professor, of course, said, well, young man, come and show it to us. And of course, then Richard did a great impression of Fritz Perls, where the professor came to the wrong conclusion, said, wow, we're so happy because now we have someone in our group who's also gifted and has this special intuition. And then Richard said, no, everyone can learn it. And then they picked John Grinder. And then they said, okay, you can teach the Gestalt therapy classes. And John Grinder was assigned as the associative professor to supervise the whole lessons. That's how it all started. Of course, the really irony of the whole thing is that Richard Bandler claimed that you don't need a special gift and intuition and that everybody can learn it, but in fact, of course, Richard is very gifted. So I always think, yeah, you're sure that's your moral and your philosophy, but in fact, you are quite gifted at what you do, and many people who try to, do the same thing do it way worse than Richard does. So indeed, yeah, that was a classic Bandler move. Yes, he was very good at, getting other people to do his work. For one reason, his brain type. He has a type 8 boss brain type, and that is someone who is quite dominant, quite aggressive, but also sees the world as a smoking ruin, and that you should be able to aggressively go get whatever you want to get. So that is one of the reasons why he did what he did. Yes, exactly. So in this chat they say that the big thing was that he not only was working with text, but actually was working with transcribing audio. So he was really listening to the patterns that and indeed, we're going to do through the whole history of NLP and today, but it's okay. That he walked around talking like Virginia Satir everywhere he got started. Yes, actually he lived in a villa on the campus that was owned by the psychiatrist who owned the publishing company that he was working for. And the psychiatrist went to India for 1 year, and then he could stay in the villa of the psychiatrist. And it happens to be the villa next to the villa of Virginia Satir. And Virginia Satir had very thick glasses. She could not drive that well. So when she noticed that she had a student living next to her, she asked him, well, can you drive me around? I'll pay you for driving to be my chauffeur. And he actually started out as the chauffeur of Virginia Satir. And then he, of course, was present at all the sessions that Virginia Satir did. And then he started to notice all the questions that he asked, and that turned into the meta model. So the meta model has actually been developed by Virginia Satir. And they actually written, most people don't know it, but Richard Bandler, John Grinder, and Virginia Satir have actually written a book called Family Changes with Family, I think, something like that. So that's actually a very good book about the meta model. Was that the commune where he met Gregory Bateson? Well, it was the Human Potential Movement. They had this very nice environment at Santa Cruz, and Gregory Bateson was part of that community, absolutely. So let's get to the topic of today, because you have to work later on today, so we don't have all the time of the world. So the topic for today is my coaching format, but it's also a way of me checking to see which parts of NLP you have under your belt and how do you understand them. So the coaching format is basically 3 sessions of 2 hours with 2 weeks between them. The first session is that's how I sell it, at least, is that I say, okay, in the first session we take away the negativity, we remove all the negative stuff. Then in the second session we replace the negative stuff that you lost with new positive stuff. And the third session is basically a checkup to see whether it all works. I do this based on no cure, no pay. People are allowed to, they decide themselves in the last session whether they should pay you or not. I coached about 550 people like this, and I had 2 clients, one for sure and one that I have a little bit doubt, who looked as if they were screwing me over. I had one coming in, I thought, oh, so how do you feel? I said, very badly, didn't work, sorry, I'm not going to pay you, bye-bye. Oh, and then he happily went on his merry way. And one that I don't know for sure about. Of those 550 people, the 90% have actually requested an invoice. They were so happy, they happily wanted to pay me. So you lose about 10% of the people you coach, but in fact by offering it like that, you entice much more people to actually hire you as a coach than that you lose by not being able to help them. If NLP coaches or trainers say that they can help that they never have any client that they can't work with, then they're lying. I've actually seen Richard fail with one client. It's quite rare, but it happened.
Yeah.
And I say so you should always take into account that not all coaching will get to the objectives that were set up beforehand, and I would be ashamed if I then sent them an invoice. The reason why we have 2 weeks between the sessions is that the shorter the time between the sessions, the better for the coach, because I say the personal charisma and personal impact of the coach tends to give people a positive vibe that works for a couple of days. And but the longer the period there is, the better for the coachee, because then they get much more time to actually check whether they are able to continue to feel good. It's quite easy to get people to feel good during the coaching and a couple of days afterwards. So I think 2 weeks is a nice, I say, balance between the right things. I do 2-hour sessions. Basically, the first session is most of the time 2 hours or maybe a little bit longer. And I really check to see whether people are still taking in information. So sometimes, especially if people are quite disturbed, I work quite a lot with psychiatric patients. If after 1 hour I see, okay, he's not taking in anything, then I'll stop earlier and then just add another session to it. But as long as people are taking things in, as long as I can see the unconscious mind registering what I'm saying and giving all these access of signs that they actually are processing it, then I keep on going.
I'm taking some notes here.
You're good, yes, sure. I'm reading the chat in the meantime. Lol, that's something you hear about from Tony Robbins fans. They'll feel the effects of a live conference wear off after a couple of days. Yes, that's the Tuesday morning dip. People experience this after taking ecstasy pills in the weekend on rave parties, but they also experience it once they fly back from the Tony Robbins seminar. It's one thing to feel great during a seminar, but it's much more important to actually learn stuff so you continue to feel great when you're home. So I think the hardest part of coaching is actually getting people to allow you to help them. So getting clients is way much harder than solving problems. But the second most difficult part is to actually get clients to where you know that what you offer them works because they have done it with a session with you. Then actually get them so far that they actually start doing the same things when they're on their own in the periods between these coaching sessions. I had so many times, and the second session I said, how did you go? They said, yeah, well, it was bad time, I felt bad. I said, okay, which technique did you do? And they go, that's what I should have done. I should have done a technique. But again, that's my responsibility. It's I think it's the responsibility of the coach to actually make sure that clients continue to do the stuff that they teach them in a coaching session. So there is a remark, damn, this dude straight up related it to the 3-day ecstasy blues. Yes, I did, but I'm not sure who the dude is, so maybe you want to elaborate it in the chat. So anyway, so the first session, I start always out with figuring out people's brain types, especially because for me, brain types really steer the coaching towards a certain goal. Most of the time, stop sinning and start doing your main virtue. As you can hear, I'm the dude. Yes. You can say that on any public forum, Joost compared Tony Robbins to ecstasy. I have no quarrel with that. I don't think that Tony mind anyway. So the figuring out brain types really helps also because of course we did not go into many of the details, but there's a whole list of what Colin de Jong calls psychopathologies. Mental illnesses that are associated with brain types. So if you have someone who complains, for instance, if I have someone with a type 2 helper and she complains about having these very strong negative mood swings, then I know, okay, that has something to do with the hardware structure, the biological structure of her brain. So then I follow a different strategy than when someone, for instance, if you say, well, I have the problem with, well, let's take an example, with being over theatrical, too much emotional, and then I think, okay, that doesn't match your brain type. It's probably learned behavior where someone has positive, positive reinforced that behavior, so we can probably unlearn it. There's a big difference between getting people who are, who do the evolutionary behavioral patterns in unhealthy ways. Because you really can't stop them from doing those evolutionary patterns. You can only change them from unhealthy to healthy patterns. To someone who learned unhealthy behaviors, and then we can actually unlearn it. So the first step is brain types, but I'm not going to spend too much time on it because that's very directly part of NLP, in the sense that Richard Bentler now certifies my advanced NLP master practitioner, where brain types are about 1/6 of the program. So there's a very, backdoor way that I sneaked it into NLP. But the second part is that I then use the first session to basically test people's brains. How good are they with feelings, imagining and thinking, internal dialogue, self-talk. Because I want to know how much control they have over those processes. And I know that 80s NLP, you had to listen to people, and if they said, well, I see this problem and I can't imagine myself doing this, but hopefully you and I can come up with some kind of picture where we can see, and where I can see myself going forward. And then they would say, oh, this is a visual person, so we have to do visual stuff with them. Well, this is one of the few things that has really been researched, not only for to criticize NLP, but also because other people came up with the same idea. And it just doesn't turn out to be the case. That it is not, if people use visual predicates a lot, doesn't mean they're visualizing inside their head. On top of that, if you tend to think in, okay, this is a person who visualizes a lot, then it's highly unlikely that the problem is a visualization problem, because that's actually one of the senses that I have a lot of control over. Of most of the time, the problem is with the second best. So if they're great visualizers, not so good with inner self-talk, but and worse with feelings, then the problem is most of the time inner self-talk and not the visualization, because they have too much control over it, nor the feelings, because that's so much unconscious that even if there were a problem, they would not notice it. There's another question: is this the new version of the VAK stuff with the eyes? Yes, the visual audio kinesthetic. I tend to try to refrain from jargon. I hate it when people use jargon. I think that if NLP stands for excellent communicators, they should talk in a way that normal people understand. I'm a great communicator. Nobody understands me who hasn't done an NLP training, because they should do first an NLP training before they can understand me. But otherwise, I'm a great communicator. That somehow doesn't match in my brain. And so, rather than, I still use the eye signal. I see them as hints, not as, oh, he's looking up now, he has to be visualizing. No, it's basically if I'm stuck and I have no clue what my client does, then I would use stuff like eye action cues to use it as a hint or as a thing to get the ball rolling. But I will much more be looking for what I call hand accessing cues. Most of the time, people use their hands. People would say, as I ask, okay, where's the bad feeling? And they would go like this, and I say, no, I have no idea. I'm clueless where I feel bad. And I say, okay, could it be in your chest turning like, or sorry, the other way around. I'm confused with the camera. And just going to. Anyways, you get the meaning. That's hands also are great accessing cues. They give away a lot. So what I do instead, rather than figuring out whether people are visual, auditory, or kinesthetic, is basically I give them exercises on all three that focus on all three senses, and then have them go out in the world and ask them, okay, 2 weeks later, how did you do? So you are familiar with the spinning feeling technique?
Yes, I like that quite a lot.
Yeah, so that's for me the most important technique. That's basically where I always start with. Most of the problems that people have disappear when they start to feel good. So if you use the spinning feeling techniques to remove negative feelings, they go, okay. I said, okay, so what was the problem? And they go, good question. I feel good. So for me, it is figuring out brain types. That's basically the hardware structure of the brain. Then go to the software part of the brain, which starts with feelings. Feelings are so important. I don't know how it's in the US, but in the Netherlands, NLP is often described as this mental, intellectual game inside your head, whereas in
Yeah.
reality, it has so much to do with feelings. If you have great mental imagery and fantastic positive thinking, but you feel bad, it doesn't. You have not, then the I say the beautiful pictures and the positive thinking doesn't mean shit. On the other hand, if you have very ugly, nasty pictures inside your head and very negative inner self-talk, but you feel great about it, no problem. And so, helping people deal with their feelings is number one. So that's why I start with spinning feeling techniques. Then we go to. I'm not sure. I don't think that I came up with it. I know for sure I didn't came up with it, but I'm just always wondering whether people actually see the full implications of the fast phobia technique. In the US, NLP could be the modeling stuff, a business course, or even a cassette tape to stop smoking. Yeah, exactly. Those are all applications of NLP. And the modeling, they don't really model because they are clueless about what a real model is within NLP. But they will use the term to sell courses. And to stop smoking is actually a great application of NLP. Unfortunately, it only works like 50% of the time because some people are. It's very easy to get them through hypnosis and NLP to stop smoking, and other people have a very long, need a long time with a lot of coaching to stop smoking. But that's something else. And so the fast phobia cure actually is not only applicable at phobias, which is of course the main the main problem that the name suggests. It actually has to do with how to deal with negative imagery about the past or the future. Phobias, of course, are future related, but they also work for traumas. But then you don't. What you only do is rewinding the traumatic experience in black and white from the end to the beginning, preferably with mental circus music playing inside your head, which is of course all combined way too complex for your conscious mind to do it, but you can just instruct your unconscious mind to use this to neutralize bad experience from the past. Do you use the fast phobia cure in that way?
Yeah, I use it in a number of ways. I'm fascinated to hear you talking about it in this way because I don't even necessarily think about it as a phobia cure. I know that's what it's called.
Yes.
But I see the application of disassociating and these mechanisms for helping to disassociate so that a person can have more control over the emotions surrounding, the goal or the problem that they have.
Right. Talk about dissociation worries me because I feel that in the process you can use dissociation, but it doesn't necessarily. There are a few clients that actually need it. So if you have the 80s version of the fast phobia cure, then you imagine yourself sitting in the empty movie theater with yourself also standing in the projection room, looking at the screen at all the bad shit that happened. Yeah. That is actually the 80s version. And as it turned out, some people need it because if you ask people to make a bad experience in the past in black and white, and they immediately start to cry, then you think, okay, this is probably so much bad stuff that actually we need dissociation in order to make sure that they can go through the process without being distracted by all the emotions. But I think I think that like 99 in 100 people, you can skip the whole movie theater story, and basically just say, okay, what is the first good experience after the bad episode? Make that black and white, put on circus music, and make it rewind it very quickly to the first good first good moment before the episode started, the bad episode. I only use the movie theater if people actually start crying during this exercise.
Right. I think it's an important distinction. What you described there, where you're standing and watching yourself in the movie theater and watching yourself on the screen, I've learned to call that double disassociation.
Yes.
And
actually
I found that
dissociation.
Actually triple, right? Yes. Okay, perfect.
Because you're in the projection room. That's the first dissociation in the movie theater, but you're also in the movie on the screen.
Right.
So actually, there are three dissociations happening.
Right. And so that separates a person's emotional experience about the thing that they had, which they're generally experiencing in their own mind from a first-person perspective, like as if they're in the situation. And now you're able to see it as a thing on the outside of you. So, all the way back to Gestalt, basically, projecting your parents in the chair kind of thing, it's something that's outside of you. And now it gives you a way of, once it's been thingified, then you can start to manipulate it and, bring in new information and change the context around it, so on and so forth. I don't normally go to a second or third disassociation unless it seems like you need it.
Exactly.
But I still have been sort of labeling that disassociation. I think what you're just saying, though, is that you're distorting it and not disassociating.
Exactly.
And changing the color, adding the circus music, so on and so forth.
So,
but that's the easiest thing. So I start there, and then we systematically sort of go deeper if it seems it's relevant. And it's very rare that you have to go all the way to the point that you're watching yourself in the movie theater.
Exactly, yes. So I think that the good thing about dissociation is that it makes it less of an emotional experience to do the technique. The drawback of dissociation is that it makes less impact. So the technique has less impact. So so when you do it, for instance, in hand gestures, the way I started out with doing it is actually presuming that their timeline is with the future in front of them and the history of the past behind them. So if you say actually, okay, we have this moment, the bad things were over. There's a good moment. Make it black and white. Rewind it back, and you move like this with your hand. That already makes a much more impact because that's the associated timeline. Whereas if you say, okay, here's the past, and now we're going to move like this, that suggests a dissociated timeline. It's another way of introducing dissociation. And you can actually see if this is too emotional for people, that it is quite handy to start doing like this. So if I do the movie theater story, I always include a dissociated timeline by going this way. But you can also see that the associated timeline, if you do it like this, because it is so emotional, has more impact than if you do it this way. Struggling with the camera again. So dissociation is good to know that because it lessens the impact, but it also lessens the emotional. If the emotions overtake the person, then what happens is that they start to run the movie in color from the beginning to the end again. That's why they become emotional. But you want to stop that, so that would re-traumatize them.
Right.
But the important part is that, but it's also nice to have a lot of impact on the brain. So that's why I prefer as associated as possible as they can emotionally, manage.
Interesting.
And then sorry?
No, as you said, it's interesting. We could go on about this, I think, because, but I don't necessarily know that we need to. I definitely think that it's important to reassociate, sort of peel back the layers and put that positive emotions in first, and then experience that from a first-person, fully associated perspective as much as possible.
Right.
And that's the art of it, is getting back to that point that you've taken the negative emotions out, put the positive emotions in, reassociate fully into that experience.
Right.
But you don't always have to go all the way to that full disassociation. You still want enough emotional content that it is having an impact. And as you're describing all this, it's making me sort of realize some of this I just have been doing somewhat intuitively, partially because I'm just trying to be efficient with my time.
Exactly. Well, that's what NLP is. NLP is about efficiency.
Yeah.
So there's also the reason why I do spinning feeling first, because the number one reason, if you do the fast phobia cure process to get over bad stuff from the past, then if people are still able to feel bad after you've done the process, and you ask them to test it, to try it out, feel bad about this period, then most often the easiest way to get rid of that last negative emotion is actually to say, okay, let's do the spinning feeling technique again, and then combine the both of them. So basically say, okay, not only do we have to make it black and white, circus music, rewind it fast, but you also have to keep this good feeling going in your body. So that's absolutely a option. So there's another remark. There are some people that you don't want to teach to dissociate as a coping mechanism too. I think you can create a delayed app-reaction, like when someone flips out going into a deep trance. Not in my experience, but if people flip when they go into a trance, that's very rare, first of all, and second of all, it's most of the time it has to do with actually a disorder in their I think how are these? No, they're not
Lymph nodes.
Huh?
Lymph nodes.
I don't know. There's some kind of organ here. I only know the Dutch word. I don't know what the. But
is it for swallowing, or does it create hormones? What does it do?
I'll have it translated by.
Don't worry. No, if it creates hormones, it's lymph nodes. If it's for swallowing, then your throat or esophagus, perhaps. I don't know.
Let me see. Thyroid.
Thyroid. Okay.
Might not be here at all. I have no clue where the thyroid is, but there's.
It's part of the lymph node system. Yeah, that's
good. But there's it's a well-known issue with the thyroid, that people experience some kind of panic or fear attack when they tend to fall asleep. So you can always check to see if that is happening. But it also happens when you hypnotize people. When they go just before they go into a trance, they can actually have this issue with the thyroid, where the thyroid somehow does some kind of I don't know what kind of neurotransmitter or hormone it gives off, but it gives off some stuff that put people into a panic attack or into a fear attack. And but you can check with them if you wake them up, and you can just ask them, do you also tend to have panic attacks just before you fall asleep? And if they say yes, you have to send them to a doctor, because they can actually very easily check it. There's a known medicine for it. It has no drawbacks, and that not only helps them go into a trance when they are on that medicine, but also, and that's much more important for them, helps them much easier to fall asleep, because it's very, very difficult to fall asleep if you have a panic attack just before you fall asleep. So that is something that is real, but also very rare. I have, I think, 3 times in my life experience. I had to work with someone who had the problem. So let's go back to the fast phobia cure. Do you also use it for the future? Because of course, if you remember bad stuff in the past, it's basically the same as imagining bad stuff happening in the future, and then you rewind it to black and white. But then you make a new movie, as to so to say, where you still see people experiencing bad circumstances, but you also see that they remain calm, that they stay in their place of power and solve problems. That's also what you use?
Yeah, that's a variation that I don't think I use as often. I normally would do what I just call future pacing, where I'm asking them to just imagine this circumstance where this would happen and how do they feel about it. Just a simple test like that. But I also would always include the expectation that you can't control what other people are going to do around you. So let's assume that this person's still disrespectful to you, for instance. Yes. And if they're disrespectful, how do you feel about it? And so I'm not necessarily asking them to visualize it in such a concrete way. I think you're talking about it in a little more of a concrete way than I normally do it.
Yes. So I think it's, for instance, if people have fear of flying, then it's quite important that they see themselves in the plane. Well, it's pointless to have them be very relaxed while they're crashing down and die. That's pointless, but it is quite handy to actually see themselves sitting in the plane, and there will be turbulence, quite bad turbulence, and the plane will go.
Okay. Well, I would certainly do that. 100%. Yes. If that's what the topic, then that's absolutely what I'd be doing.
Right.
It seems like most of the stuff I end up talking with the people about have to do with boundary lines and relationships. So that's generally this kind of what I just described. That's generally what I'm helping them to visualize.
Right.
Of course, I'm a money coach, and very, very often the circumstances where this would come up is because the spouse is not on the same page with the budget.
Right.
And so they've got these ongoing conflicts around this. They're trying to stick to the budget, and money's almost always tied to some attachment need that from early childhood trauma, and so that's now being played out in their relationship. But I can't solve their whole relationship. I can sort of just do this one thing and help them to perhaps have a conversation about an ongoing conversation, have some discipline, let's call it, about maintaining boundary lines.
Right. So yes, but so that's good. Hi Jane. There's a new viewer. So let's say hi to her.
Hi Jane.
Okay, there are. Well, I'm very happy. Mojo Ministry, thank you for joining us and thank you for following me. And I really appreciate all your remarks. Sometimes we, due to time restraints, we can't go into it. But there is, he or she found research that sleepwalking is caused by an overactive thyroid. There you go. So. Can I, because again, I'm using this technique not necessarily to solve the issues at hand, but basically to test to see how much control they have over these processes. So it would be handy to watch episode 2 of the online ABC NLP practitioner in English.
Yeah.
Because there I discuss very extensively how to use the same process for the future.
Yeah.
And
I have watched that. I did watch it, and I don't know what's different right now, because I know I definitely do this future pacing, and I'm visualizing the specific context that we've been working on with the positive feelings to test, essentially. And of course, I also think it's crucial, just as you did, to add the negative experiences to make sure you still feel resourceful during those negative encounters. Again, you can't control the turbulence on a plane, or whether or not your spouse is going to stick to the guidelines that you're asking them to.
Yes.
So I don't know if there's a difference right now.
Neither.
It did occur to me that, okay.
but it sounds that you work a lot with making sure that they feel good while they imagine the situation. But it might be an associated process, whereas I really want them to see dissociated. Because when you make movies about the future where you see yourself, with our conscious mind we think, okay, now we are thinking about the future, but actually our unconscious mind takes us as instruction movies. So that's the reason why it's important to actually see yourself acting in the way you want to act, so that the unconscious mind gets an instruction.
Yeah. So this might help me then, because actually I do both. Good. I always actually use that languaging, see yourself out there on the screen. That's almost always exactly how I phrase it.
Right.
And you can see, I'm talking to a person, let's call him Jim. You can see Jim on the screen interacting with his wife. Watch what Jim does now. Okay. And then I ask him to step into Jim's shoes and experience that firsthand.
Right.
And then so I guess I do exactly what you're suggesting here. And then I repeat that process again into the future. Let's say 6 months has gone by, or whatever timeline you think is best. What do you think? 2 weeks, 6 months? How long will it take before you're convinced that this change has made place? And they say, oh, okay, you 3 weeks or something. It's 6 months, whatever they say. And I go with that. And then, okay, now see Jim on the screen having this interaction. Watch how that plays out. And I'll step into Jim's shoes, and how does that feel? It's kind of how I do it.
Right. Well, then I'm perfectly happy.
Okay. It's like these are conversations, and I'm not as formula driven in these conversations. And I'm also doing some of the work I'm mentioning here, I'm doing through an employer, and the people who are interacting with me are not necessarily sign up for NLP coaching.
Right.
And so I probably am cutting corners more often, which is part of the reason I've had a hard time describing this. As I'm refining this, I'm thinking, when I'm really doing it 100%, this is what I've just described is how I would do it. It sounds like it's just the same as what you're suggesting I should be doing. But also, there are many conversations where I'm cutting corners because I'm sort of just intuitively knowing that they don't necessarily need this bit of this time, or I wouldn't need to spend time, being so specific about this, or maybe that partially because they're not on the same page with me as far as actually, I'm just dropping suggestions as much as anything. I'm not necessarily walking them through a process and making sure, testing along the way, that they're having the experience that they need.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yes, well, actually, even though I love rigidity, I
Yes.
also am very conscious of the fact that NLP is not this long list of all the protocols and all the steps, but is actually much more intuitive, ad hoc. For instance, through conversational stuff, achieving the same objectives in many different ways. So I'm not trying to push one way of doing it. I'm just checking to see whether all the important parts are there. And it is both the format for coaching, but also a way for me to get a sense of where you stand with NLP and how you use it. So I'm actually always quite happy if people do stuff conversationally without actually having to go through the whole process step by step.
Well, I think it always comes down to how we're testing, operating, testing, and executing, right? That Tote model. And if I'm really clean about this, I might be in some cases a little more specific and rigid. And in other cases, I've already tested well enough that I don't have to be as rigid with the method. And so that's always a growth area, I think. That how much do I need to do? How efficient with my time can I be? When is it just a suggestion and tested, that sounds good, move on to the next step, sort of thing. And
exactly.
It's good to be going over this, because this is sort of like, if you're a boxer, you have to be so good at your timing on your jabs. And the jab is the basic thing, and no one wants to keep practicing the jab, but that's where it all starts, I think it's just more complicated than a jab, but it's still really. Jab hook combo, it has to be there or nothing else works. Forget the complicated stuff if you can't do this.
I actually think that jabbing is much more difficult than NLP. NLP is really
That's
simple.
probably true.
There's an interesting remark by Mojo Ministry. That was what the whole generation of pickup artists had to learn with a school called the mystery method. It was initially very robotic, as that had to move from step-by-step processes to actually be able to intuitively keep a conversation going.
Mm-hmm.
I find it especially funny to say because historically they all learned it from a online forum back in the days, and it was like early 90s, 2000. And I actually know these guys and have explained how NLP worked to them in the end of the 90s and the 2000s. So I'm very happy that when they use NLP nowadays, it's much better than they used to do it, because they used to have very bad ideas about how NLP worked. Let's move on, because you have to go, I think, within 10 or 15 minutes.
Yeah, I've got about 20 minutes.
20 minutes, okay, that's good. So let's very quickly go to inner self-talk. My main technique is what we call the sexy voice technique, where you basically keep the negative inner self-talk, the words the same, but change the way they sound. Could also be Donald Duck or a very sleepy voice if people are laying in bed. You use the same kind of technique?
Yes, I very rarely teach that to others, though.
Okay.
In my line of work, I don't normally do that, but I think that's part of what we're talking about here, is that I want to be developing more of a private practice, and in my private practice, I would be doing that more.
Right.
I do. Yes, I certainly use that with myself, though. I catch myself sometimes just going, "Oh, all I've got to do is change the tone of voice here."
Exactly.
And then practice it several times. Maybe I go for a walk and use a sexy voice, or maybe a more funny voice, or sometimes I just try a variety of voices to kind of loosen it up so that it means something different.
Good. Again, I don't care what kind of business you build, but it sounded when we first met that you would appreciate mentoring on building a business.
Right.
But we're going to figure out what would be the best business to build.
Well, you'll help me with that, and I definitely do want to build a business. I work for somebody else now, and they take way too much of the money that I'm earning from them. Yes. I'd prefer to control my own time and do it with my own methods and earn more of the money.
Yes. But we're losing weight, of course, is a very, if you start helping, coaching people losing weight, that is a very, very good way to build your own business. It's just I have to do it a couple of times successfully, and then
Yeah.
clients will just storm your door because people
Yeah, I
struggle
like
so
that
much.
quite a bit. Yeah.
So once I've done all these basic techniques,
Hmm.
that would be the first session done. In the second session, I basically give them 2 weeks to try this out. Then the second session, if they if it did not work for them, I'm going to check what didn't work, how to get it working after all. But let's say that the all work perfectly fine. Then I move to the second part by getting them more positivity into their lives. First of all, by using switch techniques to improve their self-image. Is this something you do? At least I
Yeah,
know the
definitely.
procedure. Good.
Yeah.
And
I like the switch technique quite a lot.
good, good.
Yeah.
And do you use this collapsing one where they collapse toward a point and draw out?
It's easier to explain than some of the other versions with the just different picture sizes or shattering glass. I've heard a number
Right.
of different ways to do it. I'm a creative person by nature, so I've tested a lot of different ways of just expanding and moving the picture.
Exactly. Yeah, you
Um,
can.
I find that it's a little more difficult. It seems like not as many people get the idea of the image going off to the horizon and coming back.
Okay, that's
But
the primary one that I'm using.
yeah, okay. Maybe I could just practice with that a little more, and I'll get more comfortable explaining it. But shrinking it down to a dot and blinking it black and white is super easy for anyone to understand. You can say it as simple as that,
Yes.
and they get it.
And it
So
works through Zoom. So this one is very difficult
right,
to do through online sessions. I
right.
figured that out. So that's the good one about the collapsing one. That's good in 2D. All right. So I think it's quite. I think that the self-image is about who you are in the essence of you, not like how your body looks, but who you are in the most essential, deepest core being of yourself. I also think that thinking in terms of essences as a philosopher is complete bullshit. So this is typically one of those illusions that the brain comes up with a very healthy illusion. And as long as you imagine yourself being this wonderful, fantastic human, I think you cannot be too positive. The only problem is that people tend to start to see themselves doing things, and often doing things that in reality they can't do, and that becomes a problem because then you either build arrogance without competence, or
Yeah.
basically have idiots thinking that they can do stuff that they can't do. But as long as you keep it to actually being and your essence and your core being, then you can't go over the top, I think. So I always ask people, do you see yourself as a spiritual being or a spiritual person? If they say yes, then they end up with a self-image where they see themselves as this holy body of light, I say, creature of God or something like that. That is angel
Yeah,
of light.
sure.
And if they're not spiritual, then they can pick their own superhero. I'll turn them into Batman or Superman or wherever they want, because I think that's about as positive as you can feel about yourself.
Hmm.
So I'll go to extremes in self images, as long as
Yeah,
people realize the difference between being a creature or being someone instead of actually being able to do stuff. If you start to do weird stuff because your self-image tells you that you can't do it, well, in reality you can't do it, that's a big issue.
okay. Yeah. I think when I first learned it long ago through Tony Robbins material, I was doing it in a way that I was imagining myself do things. And I'd use a trigger and then imagine myself, once I see the trigger, and then I would, you know, and I learned somewhere along the way that that doesn't work quite as well. I'm still refining this. I listened to yours just the other day, and you imagine a being of light. I almost would never go that far with this. And I've practiced the using a superhero type scenario, and that doesn't feel totally congruent to me. I've always said, imagine yourself as if you're like in almost an alternate reality, and you're the best, very best version of yourself, and strip away the background. So it's just you being you. You know what that means. You see yourself, standing in a certain way, and you feel great. You're very confident, or confidence is often the thing,
Right.
and you can say the thing that you need to say, but you're not just doing anything. You're just standing there, and looking at that picture, that is the most confident version of myself that I could imagine being, and that's kind of where I leave it.
Yes. Well, that sounds excellent.
Okay.
Yes.
You're talking about going all the way to, this is what you did with Nora-Lisa, to a being of light. And I practice that, and I quite like that, actually.
Yes, but it only works for people who see themselves as quite spiritual. And in fact, I think that the body of light, being this spiritual light being, is actually such a strong mental image that often you don't even have to do the swish technique afterwards, because the moment they realize it, they go, and then the image is already there, and only talking about it already works as a kind of swish. So I find it much, if people go for that, then that often works best. The superhero, I had one issue with it. If people are very egalitarian, then they tend to think that seeing yourself as a superhero somehow puts you on top of or over of being better than other people. And I had one lady who had a really big issue with it. So I had to change it at that point. But again, I'm a Nietzschean philosopher. And Nietzschean is very much elitist. So I always say I only work, as I think I said already to you as well, I only work with the top 1% most extraordinary persons on earth. So, but if you're very egalitarian, then it might run into issues. But that sounds all perfect, the way you described it. That is excellent. So then we get finally to timelines. I'll hurry a bit up. So then I will figure out people's timelines. I will optimize their timeline to basically run it with the future in front of them and the past behind them. Also teach them that they can switch to having it running from left to right or the other way around, in case that they are burdened by a lot of work, that if they have difficult time management, or too much stress at work because they have too much to do, it's much better to run your timeline like this. But this timeline is the ideal timeline when actually enjoying life.
Yeah.
And then we get to the 30-year plan. I'll do it really quickly. See if we can do it in the
that was fast, but I can agree with you there. Yeah. If I'm analyzing, I want to see it this way, but if I'm in it, if I'm actually in flow, I'm going to be in a timeline that's facing this way. Exactly. And so if I'm walking through the timeline, I will ask them to move it. And I think once you understand that you can move it, once just that suggestion comes in, and someone has so much more control over how they're thinking and how to imagine things into things. And so, anyway. Yeah.
So,
but I'm often testing for flow. I want to make sure that it can happen automatically. And I think the way to do that is by getting them in a timeline where the past is behind them, and only the very next thing is out in front of them, and they can imagine themselves taking next steps or feeling their way into those next steps.
Yes, but if you say that only the very next thing is in front of them, then you get issues with long-term goals. So
so you got to do both, right? You got to be able to see the 5-year timeline and the steps between, and then maybe shift it.
So you have at least a widening. I should do it the other way around.
Okay.
So a widening. Yeah, that's the way it looks. So a widening timeline, so you get more room. And then when you create a 30-year plan, which is basically imagining how your life looks like in 30 years, you imagine a huge drive-in movie screen, all the way this way, all the way in the future, on the very far end of your timeline. But you make the picture as big as possible, so you can still see it today. If you make small pictures.
So does that mean that it kind of goes up on a horizon or something, so they can see how things are sort of...
You can slope it up really by a small amount of percentage, because then that suggests that every day is better than the day before. But if it's too steep, then it would be like, I have this mountain to climb. So that stress people too much. But the importance is that if you have in the future a really big picture, then you can basically shrink to half the time. Use smaller pictures, so that you can still, once you're here, you still have a picture like this, but it's in reality a much smaller picture than the mental image of in 30 years, which was the drive-in movie theater. So then you can actually see all the pictures. That's also the reason why this approach works quite badly when you have a lot of things to do. Because then suddenly all the pictures are in front of you and they're coming at you. That's why people say, "Oh, I have so much to do. It's like this mountain of stuff that is coming at me." But it is literally how they explain that their timeline works.
Right.
And as you organize,
that's my experience personally, by the way. is that I'm fairly detail oriented, and I recognize, for instance, when I'm producing music, there's a lot of little tiny movements that have to happen and little things to test along the way. And so I imagine this like just enormous amount of things kind of coming down on me, and that's uncomfortable.
Exactly.
So I often try to visualize it as an angle going off, in a perpendicular up. So it's sort of in between. It's not totally disassociated, but I don't think that's working for me very well, frankly.
No, many people do that. It doesn't work. So either choose. So if you have a lot of things to do and this is uncomfortable, switch to this one.
Yeah.
Because then then all the things you need to do in the future fall outside of your field of vision, and you basically only have to do like this. Okay, what's on my plate now? So going this.
Right.
And you actually do the same thing. By what you do is basically making the picture of the very first thing that you need to do so big that you actually don't see what the pictures are behind it.
Yeah.
But I don't think that's a good strategy, because that will.
So I should be shrinking the picture down a little more, giving myself some space, perhaps, with it.
At least you should see that all the pictures for the coming 30 years in front of you.
Yeah.
One becoming bigger and bigger the further out they are in the future, and if that annoys you because you see a lot of stuff that you need to do, then switch to this one, and then go to basically do I'm only going to look what's on my plate now. I'm going to ignore everything outside my current plate, and once that task is done, then the time basically moves on, and you get the new plate with the new task, and you can do now let's do that. But for your unconscious mind, it's important that you can actually see what direction you want to go with your life by looking at all the pictures for the coming 30 years.
Yeah. So we've got this idea that it moves somehow. Still, this isn't settled for me. Either it moves, which doesn't seem to happen unconsciously, or it's sort of like it's on an assembly line, and the next thing gets kind of popped out in front of me. But I can't see all that stuff over there necessarily. Yes. So that's why it has to move.
So you actually you move it like either it goes like this, and then you take it and you switch it completely to this one, and if that's annoying, you switch back to this one. But on this one, you don't see what's on the periphery. You only see what's right in front of you. But when you use this one, then you can actually, your unconscious can see, this is what we all want to do for the coming 30 years. Yeah. So very quickly, your 30-year plan, make sure you see yourself very healthy, in the best of health, happy, emotionally feeling good, with the love of your life. Do you already have a partner?
No.
Okay, then we have.
No, I'm actually going through divorce right now.
Okay. So
yeah.
Get through divorce, then find a better
partner. Right.
And then see where you live. But this is also the level of aspiration. I don't like ambition. I don't mind inspiration, but inspiration, then you're walking someone else's path. I like aspiration, which is inspiration that comes from the inside of you. So if you see a really big house for yourself in 30 years, it means you have to really work hard. So you basically can scale the house to know how hard you have to work the coming times. But then see what kind of work you do. That will be for now the most important question. What kind of work do you do in 30 years?
Consulting, NLP practice. I can see myself moving more into, I think hypnosis is going to really come back strong. And I see myself doing more hypnotic work. You could say I'm inspired by the work of Milton Erickson. So something along those lines is how I sort of visualize it. And I can imagine myself doing that into my 90s, for instance, still having those kinds of conversations that are consulting, but also very hypnotic in nature.
Right. Well, that sounds like a perfectly good business plan. Especially if you use hypnosis to get people to lose weight or overcome all kinds of issues, or even deal with money issues. That if you're able to, I teach NLP at the Erasmus University. Actually, within a course about financial advising, where they're basically saying people should. Not spend all their money on their next home, but spend a bit less, so that they will be less stressed to pay off the mortgage. Then at least we know what kind of coaching practice you want to build for yourself. And oh yeah, and you have to see that you actually acquired all the skill sets and gotten all the experiences that are needed for you able to create this life for you. But I think you're already quite skilled at hypnosis, NLP, and stuff like that.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I mean, it's something I'll always continue to grow in. I think that's what's beautiful about it is you're so many people and the culture, the zeitgeist changes. So you're also changing your approach accordingly.
Yes.
Lots of stuff like that. It's going to always continue to happen, but that's what makes it interesting.
So now let's check when you get what. So in 15 years, is the love of your life already there?
Yes.
Good. And are you already full-time employed by yourself in your own business?
Yes.
Good. So in 5 years, is the love of your life already there?
It's possible.
Okay. If you had a choice, would you
yes.
choose it?
If I had a choice, yes. Yes.
Okay. And are you already 100% working in your own business?
Yes.
So in 2 years, is there the love of your life already there?
It's highly likely.
Okay. And are you already 100% working in your own business or still part-time?
No, I believe I can do it in that much time. I need to get a strategy and be extremely disciplined about it.
Yes, exactly.
You know?
Good. And then in 1 year, is the love of your life already in your life?
It's not likely.
Okay. And are you already running your own business?
I very well could be doing my business 100% within a year.
And in 6 months? So no love of your life yet?
No. I should not be pursuing a relationship in the next 6 months. I don't believe.
I don't know. I always think that, but I'm very bad. My brain is very bad at staying home alone, or I say. So at the times that I've been single have literally been. Since my 17th I had 3 big loves. The first one broke up horribly. I ended the relationship after 5 years. It was terrible. I was just too young, had no clue what to do. The second one lasted 10 years, and the end was also quite horrible. And now I'm with love number 3, and we're together already for 18 years. Yes, 18 years, and we'll stay together as long as our health will help us do it.
Yeah.
But in all those years, I've been single twice, and twice it took me 2 weeks, and I did not plan this.
Right. So I think that's part of the issue is that I don't think I can really plan it. I sort of have to find the 1 in a million person, and so I'm not expecting that I'm going to find somebody, because I certainly could find somebody and sort of hypnotize her to be my girlfriend, and then before I know I've got problems. You know.
So the good news is that it's not a 1 in a million; it's only 1 in 100.
Okay.
So basically, if you spend some time with a suitable candidate each day, then within 90 to 100 days, you found the love of your life. If you do it once a week, it takes 2 years, and if you do it once a month, it takes 10 years. So
yeah, that's probably partially why I'm thinking that once a week is probably more realistic considering my schedule and,
once
aspects
a day,
of life right now.
I've never yet met anyone who chose once a day. In fact, the second stint that I was single, I was going for the 2 years. It just happens to be that the second girl that I picked up was just such a fantastic person that I decided to stay with her for the rest of my life. And we're still together. But that was a complete happenstance, because I planned to really enjoy hypnotizing ladies for 2 years.
Right. I think that's the frame of mind I'm in right now. I'm certainly not in a hurry to get settled down again quite as quickly, but I also know a lot more about what I need to find in a person than I did 10 years ago when I got married. So
good. Yeah. So we're at 6 months. So how's the business doing in 6 months?
In 6 months, I should have had, I probably would have had, uh, I think I would have had about 3 successful clients and approximately 6 people that I'd interacted with, 2 of which probably didn't stick, and the other 2 weren't totally ready for what I was providing for them, but 3 that changed their life.
Good. And in 3 months, where's the business in 3 months?
So even since we talked the last time, I've already started running ads on like Craigslist, and I'm thinking of other platforms and stuff. But I think I'm still building some of the stuff. But what I'm trying to do right now is just test out some different things. I'm running a thing for smoking cessation, and I also had been thinking about for weight loss. I think weight loss is actually a better avenue for me. But
I always
I'll do
think that when you start up, walk all avenues. Just
right.
As soon as
Right.
as soon as you're sold out, you can have preferences.
Right.
But before you're sold
Exactly.
out, then
So I'm running 2 ads right now, one for cigarettes and one for money coaching. Money coaching I have the most experience in, and I've got
Right.
a ton of reviews on that, positive stuff. So that I'm going to keep plugging away at. I think that's the one to be disciplined about over time. But also, it's the one where having more licensing certificate would be useful for me. The others, I can get away with some stuff. But if I have, for instance, a financial advising licensing, and I do hypnosis as a combination, it's going to take me a while to get that licensing. But that's what I need to do ultimately in the long run. That's partially what I'm saying when I see myself as 90 years old, I'm actually giving more legitimate financial advice and opinions, as well as hypnosis around helping people to solve their money wounds, so to speak.
Good.
Yeah. But
So in 1 month, where are we in 1 month?
in 1 month, I hope I would have spoken to at least one person about money coaching outside of my business.
Good.
Yeah.
And in 2 weeks? In 2 weeks we have another session going through the whole strategy to use internet to get clients.
Oh, perfect.
And
Good.
next week we look into branding, because I think so. The next week will be about branding, because I think your brand essence or your core emotion, that actually if once you know it and you are able to communicate it to your clients, that gives people the reason why they want to work with you rather with someone else.
Yeah.
And then in the second week we'll go into marketing and how to use the internet in the best possible way. But if you use it without knowing your brand essence, then you get a lot of contacts, but they don't get a reason to buy from you rather than from someone else. So then less people buy your stuff. But we'll discuss that in 2 weeks. Next week we'll go into branding. We'll go through a whole procedure to discover what your core emotion is and how you can use that to give people the reason why they should hire you rather than someone else. I think we ran out of time. I don't know if there are any questions by the viewers.
That's good. I think it's great. I think I've gotten a lot out of this. I'm looking forward to next week.
Good. Then if there are no questions from the chat, then we are ready for this week, and we'll speak again next week when we go into branding, and then we'll discover what makes you tick, and then we're going to make you a one-dimensional cardboard character, which is really I say not realistic at all, and you should refrain from using that for your private life, but it is very good in business because then people have a very clear image where you stand for, and that's actually what your brand is, rather than being this complex multi-dimensional person, which is just too confusing for people. We want to make you a one-dimensional cardboard character, but one that does the one dimension is actually a core emotion that really is important to you. So so that you at least enjoy being a one-dimensional cardboard character.
That's great. Okay, I like it. That makes sense.
Good. Excellent. Well, Jane is really looking forward to these sessions, so that is good to see. I'll see you next week. Have a great day.
Thank you.
And we'll talk again in 7 days. Bye bye.
All right. Bye bye. Thank you. Bye bye.